I believe we're live, and we're waiting for a few more people to join, and then we will open this up, and we'll start, and we'll talk about Texas in particular, but talk about the benefits of roadside habitat for pollinators. Really excited to be doing this for you all. Um, if you have questions during the thing, there is a tab at the bottom that says questions, I believe. And you can just ask your question there for any of the panelists, and we will make sure we have time at the end for all of them. So we'll just put it in the queue for questions at that point. And I bet, I can't see, but I bet we have a good smattering of people from around the country. That's exciting. I know from the sign up list, we had people all around the country, and that's great. So we're happy to do this. Okay, let's get started and let's present. So I'm Steve Blackledge. I'm the Senior Conservation Director for Environment America. Um, we are doing a series of webinars for state lawmakers and for staff. We're doing these alongside a group called PIRG, Public Interest Research Group. This is the last, but not the least, of those webinars that we're holding for state lawmakers. And let me emphasize, if you're on this call and you're thinking, I'm not a lawmaker or a legislative staffer, we've opened it up. So you're welcome here. We're happy to have you. We think you're going to like this. The focus is today is on pollinators and what states in particular can do and what some states have been doing to protect pollinators. And in particular, we want to do a deeper dive into Texas and the roadside program in Texas that has existed for decades. We'll have Sam Glinsky and Travis Jazz to talk about all the great things happening in Texas. They will introduce themselves when we get them queued up. We're happy to have them both on the call. And in a short while, we'll get into the details of Texas. Quickly, if I there I am. Okay, my bio, Senior Director of Conservation for Environment America. I work with our state groups. We have 30 different state organizations across the country, including Environment Texas, which recommended our staff down there recommended both Sam and Travis for this, and we're happy to have them on. I work with our folks around the country on pollinator campaigns. We run many of them, but all sorts of other conservation campaigns, from wildlife to public lands to forests to even oceans for coastal states. I grew up in the Midwest where pollinators are needed in farm country in the state of Iowa. I now live in Northern California in Sacramento. All right, next slide. All right, point one is that states have often been in a leadership role when it comes to saving pollinators. I should emphasize, and it's sort of assumed, but I don't want to assume it, which is that bees, native bees, honeybees, butterflies have all been struggling, from the fact that monarchs are a candidate for the endangered species list to the fact that many native bees, that the rusty patch bumblebee is on the endangered species list, to the fact that the American bumblebee, which is a particular species of bumblebee, has disappeared from many states where it used to live. Bees and butterflies are struggling. That's the emphasis of this. That's why we're leaning into it. And I should say that states, and I will say again, states have been in a leadership role. So many states have, in some manner, limited pesticides that are known to cause problems to pollinators. Neonicotinoids or neonics, that's one of them. States have made it so that ordinary folks can't walk into a store and buy neonics. They have Some states have restricted, two states have restricted the practice of coating neonics onto corn seeds and other seeds used in farming and to plant plants. A number of states have other restricted pesticides in other ways. Habitat is a big one too. That's what we're going to focus on here, but it's not just roadsides. States have done more to ensure that there's habitat in state wildlife areas, state parks, even along state buildings. But with 10 million plus acres of roadside habitat zigzagging across this country. Roads are an excellent place to start and to lean into to create habitat for pollinators. Many states have bees and butterflies on their state wildlife action plans. These are plans that each state does to protect and conserve species that need an additional boost, some of which are not yet on the endangered species list, federal or to the extent the state has one, but there are actions that states want to take to protect species. And then, of course, many states have created funding mechanisms to fund habitat and or pollinator protections, i.e. license plates. Many states have pollinator-specific license plates. Okay. If you're a lawmaker or legislator or staffer and you're on this call and you see your name on the list, stick around. You might think, oh, well, we've already solved this problem. There's a whole lot more you can do. So stick around, please. But we're going to lean into roadside habitat. And the point here is that a slew of states have taken some degree of action on roadside habitat. This isn't the full list. By our calculation, it looks like a little under half of the states have some sort of roadside habitat plan. You can see the list there. Some states did this via lawmaking legislation, passed a law. Some states did it via rulemaking by an agency. And in some states, it was just simply an agency decided, hey, this makes a lot of sense, and we're going to do this. And so it was just common sense, pragmatic choice that led the state agency, usually the Department of Transportation, sometimes working in concert with whatever the wildlife agency is, different names in different states, to do this. But even if you're on this list, like I say, stick around because there's a whole lot more you can do. And we'll go to that slide next. Okay, here's some actions that people can take. Sometimes there have been agency practices in place, but no law in the books. And I know the state of California, for example, decided, you know what, let's actually pass a law so that no matter who's the head of the DOT, no matter who's in power right now, we're going to make sure this program continues. So there's that. Some states don't have any policy. A new law can be useful there. Potentially, there's the case to be made that legislation is needed to expand or to improve an existing policy. The other role for state lawmakers would be funding. Oftentimes, if you meet with a state department, there's the case that they're doing great work with limited resources on a shoestring budget oftentimes, and additional funding can be useful. And then there's sort of the oversight role or watchful eye that lawmakers can play. You all know this, but having meetings with agency heads, the Department of Transportation, to see how the program's going, where it wants to expand, how quickly it wants to expand, what could be useful from your perspective, from a lawmaker's perspective, to help expand. Some states like to do informational hearings too, once a year, where we could get Samuel and Travis. We could get Samuel and Travis onto to a legislative hearing to talk about the great work they're doing and that the text dot or whatever the agency is in the state is doing to make progress. So there's a number of roles for state lawmakers to play. And we're thrilled that you're here to, learn more about Texas and what we're doing or what they're doing. And I'm going to kick it over to them in a second. And I'm doing so with a slide that is bluebonnets and some beautiful bluebonnets in Texas. So with that, Travis and Sam, I'm kicking it over to you.
Cool. Thanks a bunch, Steve. Yeah, my name is Sam Glinsky. I'm a vegetation specialist with the Texas Department of Transportation. I'm here today with Travis Jez, and our group oversees pretty much everything related to any sort of vegetation management throughout TxDOT. We provide support to our 25 districts all across the state and help shape policy on some of those, vegetation management decisions, manuals, different things that we publish. So I'll give you a little rundown on myself, a little bit of my background. We'll hop into the PowerPoint, and then about halfway through, Travis is going to take over, and then I'll let him introduce himself. So I actually am not a native Texan. I grew up in Connecticut, and I did most of my education there. I spent 4 years at a specialty high school doing oceanography essentially, and then went into my first 3 years of my degree there looking at oceanography and climate science before finally transitioning into an environmental science degree, get something a little bit more broad on my plate. And then in moving down to Texas, I was lucky enough to get an internship with the Department of Transportation, which has rolled into a full-time job in the 7 years that I've been here. So, been working with pollinator program for a while. We have a lot of different programs. So you'll hear us say pollinator program, wildflower program, vegetation management program. They're really all one and the same, or at least very closely related. They all play off one another. So we're going to talk about all of that just a little bit here today. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. All right. So talking about our integrated vegetation management program. Um, Historic importance. Steve mentioned how different states, some may have something sort of codified in law on, either roadside vegetation management, pollinator habitat. With Texas, as far as I know, anyways, we really don't have a whole lot in that realm. It's just something that we've been doing historically for so long that it really has become a part of the state's culture and identity, to the point where if there was any really major changes to our wildflower program, I'm sure there'd be a pretty big uproar from the public. So something we've been doing for a very long time. It started way back in the 1930s with the memorandum that was sent out that said, "Don't mow until the wildflowers have gone to seed." Um, and we've really continued that tradition ever since. In modern day, it's certainly evolved into having a bit more rules and a bit more details. But we've always stood by that sort of initial policy: don't mow until our wildflowers have gone to seed. Of course, Lady Bird Johnson played a major role, hopping about maybe 40-ish years into the future here. But Lady Bird Johnson had that, iconic saying, "Where flowers bloom, so does hope." And a lot of the things that were implemented with Lady Bird Johnson were working off some of the principles that were already developed by, at the time, what we called the Texas Highway Department, now the Texas Department of Transportation. And they had the Highway Beautification Act, which was federal. At first, that was sort of targeted more at advertisements, billboards, things like that. But it did develop into a sort of general call for improving our roadsides for the traveling public. So, talking about the delayed mowing, there was that 1937 memorandum to delay our mowing. In the modern day, this translates to June 1st. So, generally across the state, with very rare exceptions, we wait till June 1st to mow. That's generally enough to get almost all of our wildflowers to that point where the seed is viable. And then once we mow, we kind of knock that down, get some mechanical dispersal, help those seeds come up the years in the future. So, talking about some factors that are influencing our vegetation management decisions and probably influence most vegetation management decisions across the board: safety. Safety is always number one. At TxDOT, we have something we call Safety Mission Zero. That's getting to the goal of zero deaths, zero injuries on Texas roadways. So, when we make a vegetation management decision, the first priority is safety. Even if we have that beautiful wildflower on the side of the road, if it's growing up 6 feet tall and obscuring the vision of the traffic and the traveling public where it causes a safety hazard, it probably doesn't need to be in that exact location. So we do have various sort of levels of vegetation management we use in different areas to achieve these goals of pollinator health, habitat, and everything else similar, while still maintaining the safety of our system. As far as environmental stewardship goes, there's so many different topics I can talk about, but a big one in recent years and a personal project of mine is TxDOT's enrollment in the Monarch CCAA. This is an agreement that helps to, benefit the monarch, promote creation of monarch habitat, and also gives the states regulatory assurances. So it's really a mutual benefit to the species and to the states who are involved in the agreement. Like Steve mentioned, with that very, very shortly pending monarch listing decision, supposed to be finalized probably in the next week here, it's very important to, have some sort of program or involvement in something that, can protect your state, your agency from future regulatory burden. Cost is another huge factor. Of course, everything always comes down to money. So what we've found, generally speaking, is that integrated vegetation management, and we'll get into what those sort of principles are that we use in a second here. Integrated vegetation management has a huge long-term cost reduction. Unfortunately, we don't have concrete data on that because we have been doing it for almost 100 years now. Even if we could have a good comparison, it probably wouldn't mean much. But what I can say is now, across the state, doing generally between 2 and 3 mow cycles per year. If we were doing more traditional vegetation management where we have, 6, 8, 10, or even 12 mow cycles, as there are many states out there that have, our costs would, skyrocket. Just kind of thinking off the top of my head, rough numbers, we might spend 100 million a year on mowing and 60 million on herbicide. If we took our selective herbicide treatments out of the program and went to an all sort of mowing regime where we have 6, 8, 12 mows, it would probably be instead of $160 million a year, like 4 or 500 million a year. So it really does save us quite a bit of money to have an integrated vegetation management program. So what are those modern integrated vegetation management practices that we do? Mowing is one of them. In policy, we have something called modified full width mowing. What that means is for our spring mow, they'll mow 30 feet off the edge of the pavement, but any areas further than that, they should be leaving them untouched. So that way, even though we're waiting for our wildflowers to set seed, there are some like our later summer bloomers and things like that are allowed to grow sort of further off into the right of way. We have it in policy to establish non-mow areas. So we have a lot of areas that we call non-mow. That does not mean they're never mowed, because of course, if we never mow, then we have the natural ecological succession. We get trees growing up, things that generally don't agree with the transportation system from a safety standpoint. So we call them a non-mow. Realistically, what that means is they're mowed probably once a year or less. Our normal mowing is 2 cycles per year. One is that modified full width in the spring, and then we do a cleanup mow in the fall, which helps reset that tall vegetation, knock it down a little bit so that our wildflowers can get plenty of sunlight and moisture down to the ground to allow them to bloom the next spring. If we have safety concerns where we need to do additional mowing, we try to utilize a strip or a spot mow as opposed to just another full width mow so that we're preserving as much habitat as possible. And then stopping the spread of invasives, also really important. So we do wash our mowers between counties. That's written into all of our contracts, just to help prevent the spread of invasives. Some guidance, not necessarily things in policy. We want them to avoid mowing during peak monarch migration, mow only when needed, coordinate herbicide applications with mowing, and spray your invasive plants prior to mowing. In our case, Johnson grass is one of the big issues, and we found that all the mowers do is spread those seeds on down the roadway and cause us issues other places. So we need to get on those things with another means. Typically for us, that's going to be herbicide before they are able to set seed. So on our herbicide applications, herbicide can definitely be a bit of a contentious word. But for us, we make all of our applications as spot applications. They're all targeted specifically only to plants in the right of way. And now it kind of looks like in that picture there that we're doing a blanket overspray. Maybe I should have done a better picture there. That's actually just water. It's just a trial run we were doing to show off how our equipment works. But we always select for the site, whether that's the edges or the right of way, and then we select for the specific plants we're trying to target. If we're hitting that Johnson grass in the right of way, we use our specialized 5-banked system that you can see on the right to hit only that noxious vegetation where it lays. We leave everything else alone, our native grasses, our wildflowers, as best we can. For set-asides and non-mow areas, our districts each establish their own. Each of our 25 districts really is sort of their own independent entity. We provide the statewide support, but they typically have the ultimate decision-making authority in their vegetation management decisions. And establishing non-mow areas is one of that. And like I mentioned earlier, it doesn't mean that area will never be mowed. It's just sort of a more restricted or less mowing cycles in that area. On our native grass seeding, we go 100% native grass seeding as of 2024 in our rural areas. Our specification calls for only native grass seeds. We do use a very minimal amount of non-natives in some of our urban plantings. For example, we do still have Bermuda grass in some of the urban areas, but it is a relatively low amount. Even most of those urban plantings are something like 80 to 90% native. And then we have a program called the Texas Native Seeds Program that helps us to establish new varieties of native seeds, which Travis is going to talk about here in a little bit. We do wildflower seeding. That's a big one to keep our wildflowers up. We have a ton of them, but we also want to make sure that we're supplementing those wildflowers as much as we can, make sure they come back every year. So we buy a lot of seed ourselves every single year. Either Travis or I buys, probably $120,000 of seed. But we also have different mechanisms like green ribbon funding. That's something else that Travis will talk about here in a minute. The districts may buy their own wildflower seeds. And then the revegetation from construction is a big one because while that is primarily getting us grass cover, we include forbs in those mixes as well. We also do a lot of outreach. We print seed packets. Every 2 to 3 years, we buy 30,000 of those pollinator seed packets you see at the top to hand out at different events, local talks that we do, and spread the word that, not only can we do this on our transportation system, but you can do this at home. We give presentations like we're doing now many, many times a year, probably 2 to 3 dozen between myself, Travis, and the rest of our team. We have monarch way stations. These are little areas of habitat set up at our safety rest areas. And while they do serve as small habitat fragments, really what they are is to educate the public on the importance of pollinator health. So that's something we've seen a huge success with. And then, of course, more recently, the Monarch CCAA, getting involved with that. That's a whole presentation I could give on itself, so I'm not going to get into too much detail there today. I could talk about it for hours, but the Monarch CCA has been a really, really beneficial thing for TxDOT, both in terms of the public outreach and hopefully for the Monarch's health as well. All right, and then for the Texas Native Seeds program and the rest of the presentation, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Travis and let him introduce himself.
Good afternoon. My name is Travis Jez. I'm with TxDOT as well, and I've been with the agency about 14 years. My education is in agronomy, specifically plant soil relationships and how that they live together and what goes on with that. So I'll talk a little bit about Texas Native Seed Program and how it's come about in the sense that how we utilize that program within TxDOT. So the Texas Native Seed Program, first and foremost, is run by the Caesar Kleberg Research Institute out of Kingsville, Texas. And that is a South Texas, down in South Texas. And it is in what they call the Wild Horse Desert. It's really different climate down there, but it's run out of that area. And what they do for us is they look at it is a state-funded school program. And so we fund them. And what they do is they look at the native species that are along the side of the highway that are not commercially available. So what they're able to do is go and do what we call wild harvest collections. They'll collect that seed, they'll build that seed up in what we call either breeder blocks or seed banks or what. There's a lot of different terms. This is a good example of it as a picture. They'll grow it out in large chunks. The objective here is to build up a seed bank. That way it can be distributed out and we can get wildflowers and native grasses back onto the right of way that are not commercially available. Now, in the past, this was done by a plant material center through USDA, the plant material center. This is they work together to get new species out. Again, things that have not been commercially available, and we're being able to bring back habitat. So it started back roughly in about 2010. Again, helps create commercially available native seed, and we continuously work together. Now they work for other agencies, other people as well, but when they come to us and they sit down, they say, "Well, what do you want?" They'll say, "Travis, what are we looking for in the side of the road?" And we'll go through different species and talk to them about what we do and don't want in the right of way. In our case, most often we want everything to stay 30 inches or shorter, and that's for the traveling public. All of our roads, like other states, the vegetation has to be managed appropriately based on the speed of the road. That way, your sight distance doesn't get the inability to see when you're driving down the road. So we'll talk a little bit about the Texas Native Seed Program. Again, it used to be called South Texas Natives. One little caveat, which was really interesting, is not knowing about the program when I was in school. I went to school down there. I was able to work for the program and work with different types of seed, building up seed banks in order to get that out on the right of way. So Greater commercial availability. This picture here happens to be out of the West Texas area, north to West Texas. I think this is actually out of the Odessa region. But we have plots like this throughout the entire state. And what we're doing is we're growing that plant and we're seeing how it evolves and how it works in that environment. And we're taking the better seeds and then we're growing those out, growing them out continually. So which ones are best suited for the commercial production? Examples of that, and I won't read them all off to you, but we've looked at some different cotton tops, the Texas grama. A really neat one was the germplasm, the Bali bundle flower, which a lot of species like, a lot of wildlife really enjoys that. The fuego germplasm of the Indian blanket, if y'all are familiar with the Indian blanket, and so that's also called firewheel, really does really well, and it was really being pushed out by other varieties, but we've got the seed bank up high enough now to where we're able to plant that. There's many more of them. I do ask you if you get a chance to go out there and look at the Texas Native Seed Project and be able to see what they have going for them. They have been instrumental in what we do for the state of Texas in the right of ways. They're allowing us to bring back species that are non-existent or that are, for whatever reason, falling out of the tarp, if you will, or the area. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we fund this. So this is kind of what Steve was talking about earlier. How do we fund this? And this picture, great looking picture. Is this an ideal picture? Ideally, it is great. Will we see this on every inch of our right of way? Absolutely not. So this would be ideal. We'll have some pictures of what you're probably going to see. Mind you, certain wildflowers grow certain times of the year, and they like certain climates. So if we have a dry year, you might only see a certain variety come up. We have a wet year, you might not see the dry climate plants come up. So you've really got to have a really broad idea what you're expecting out of the right of way. We might see a picture like this every 7 years. That might be about what we might look at. But it's that seventh year that we really need to make sure and manage along with the other years what we're doing in our right of way. So we're talking about green ribbon money, and I'll get to that at the second bullet. There's a federal allocation for that. And what it is it's a percentage of your construction costs need to go into some sort of beautification. And it was started with trees and has moved over into native grasses and wildflower plantings. But that's on the federal side. On the state side, the state of Texas took the extra step, created a project called Green Ribbon Program, and that is 0.25% of all construction costs in a specific area of the state goes back into beautification of those roads. Now, in our situation, it is what they call non-attainment, near non-attainment air quality areas. Areas that might have a little bit of issue with the air quality, larger metroplexes, things of that. Those funds have to be allocated back into beautification. Houston area along the coast is a very good example. They do a lot of tree planting. They do a great job down there. But we've also integrated into the wildflower program. I've been with the agency about 14 years, and about 14 years ago, it's about when I saw that we really took a big step towards bringing in the wildflower program. So again, here's another little picture. We've got several more coming. You might ask yourself, where are all the wildflowers? There's a lot more there than you're thinking. Okay. And even that little bit amount adds up. We have 800,000 manageable acres that we take care of within TxDOT. Think about that. We are the largest single landowner in the United States. Okay. We have a lot of land to manage, and going off of what Sam was talking about, we have to get in there and mow at some point. We have to get in there and spray at some point. If not, we're going to have things chest high. You can't see the animals running across or somebody on the ditch. We also need it to be safe where you pull over. So safety. So we manage very closely, and we understand we might have pictures like this right here. But if we manage this over several years, the native wildlife and wildflowers will take off. They will really get going. We always say with our native grasses and our native wildflowers, close the gate, walk away for 3 years after you plant, because it might take 3 years for it to come up. That's Mother Nature. She always wins. Our public response, all walks of life. We deal with all types of people, from people that want to help us go out and do things, to people that just might want to give us some input. Again, like Sam was talking about, I think in my opinion, one of our big things that we do as far as support and letting the public know is our safety rest areas. I'm going to boast a little bit about the state of Texas. Texas has some of the best safety rest areas there are, and some of the best roads leading to those safety rest areas. And those are areas you stop, take a break, be able to walk around a little bit, stretch your legs. We've planted extensive amounts of wildflowers in those areas. We have signage explaining to you the importance of the wildflower program, the importance of pollinators, of all pollinators. So, what does this add to Texas? It's an estimated $2 billion in ecotourism. We have a lot of people that come down to Texas for the winter. They like to hang out down in the valley where it's nice and warm and the climate's pretty much stable. They leave some of those northern states for the winter because it might be too much snow. I'm from Texas, so I'm used to 105-degree weather. So that and 80% humidity. But so they come down. What do they do when they're down here? They spend money. They spend time down here. So let's educate them while they're here and there, and they can take those information back to their states and spread that. And hopefully we can get other states involved. Here's just some pictures. Picture on the left here, the blue bonnets there in the center. That's probably out towards West Texas. Kind of looks like it, little rolling country, little flat. It's not as far out as the sand dunes, but that's actually pretty good habitat right there. For that part of the country, that's about what it can handle. That's what it can support. The middle picture there, looking pretty good. That's getting into probably the piney woods. And then the picture on the right, there's a couple things there that aren't necessarily what we planted, but they're still good flowers. So the point to this picture is these plants do well where they're at because they are native. They're able to bring the pollinators through and carry them through, either it being through nectar, feeding them, or through the milkweed of raising the young caterpillar, things of that sort. Here's just a few more pictures. Here's some milkweed down in the bottom right-hand corner. And so very pretty. Through the CCAA, Sam was talking about the CCAA, we do take a look at how much milkweed we have in the right of way. One thing I do want to say is we do have quite a bit of milkweed. For our state, we're not doing too bad. The other thing is, once you see milkweed, that's what's left over from the caterpillar because she eats a whole lot. So I want to say personally, thank you. I'm going to turn it back over to Sam. If y'all have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We are here. Emails are usually the easiest thing. We do travel quite a bit, up to 80% throughout the year. And we're out there working and taking care of the roads for y'all as traveling public and for the other Texans that might be headed home for the day. So thank y'all very much. My name is Travis Jez, and I'm going to turn it back over to Sam.
Yeah, thank y'all. The only thing I'll add is that, keep in mind, we talked a lot about management, not specifically just the pollinators, but that is all what it takes to get to a point where we are supporting the pollinators. So hopefully that provides a little bit of background for y'all on what moves you can make to get to a point where you see something similar to what we have in Texas.
Great, Sam, Travis, thank you so much. Those pictures were wonderful, and the whole presentation was great. What I think we needed to hear. I had one question I wanted to ask of you both, which is not only do people, I've heard at least, not only do people come to Texas just to see in part to see the wildflowers, but you'll see like people taking the long route or driving certain destinations and maybe traffic slowing down a bit the way that in like Colorado you might have if there's a bighorn sheep on the side of the road, you might have some of that too. But in Texas, people are going out of their way to see the wildflowers. Is that the case?
100%. Yeah, we actually have something in Texas we call the Texas Highways magazine. It's a sort of normal magazine like any other. You can buy a subscription to it, get 12 issues a year, but that is actually written and published by the Texas Department of Transportation. So every year they'll publish a wildflower article with road maps for some of the most scenic wildflower drives in the state. And yeah, people are absolutely going out of their way to either take the long route or visit locations that they may not be otherwise, just to seek out those areas where the wildflowers are best.
Yeah, that seems so cool. It seems like it's become part of the culture of Texas. There's a Q&A at the bottom. It's called Q&A with a little question mark. Feel free to put any questions there. Vivian, I think you can see them the best. Have we gotten any questions yet that you can see?
No, but I have a question. So I'm wondering, like monarchs, bees, those are the most famous pollinators. Can you tell us a little bit more about like what type of other species might benefit from this, or like how it plays into like a larger ecosystem?
Yeah, absolutely. So, from an ecological standpoint, what we want to support on our right of ways is any species that is small enough where it's not going to cause a safety hazard. So, of course, we don't necessarily want to promote deer on the right of way because they cause a lot of accidents, wild hogs, other large animals that could be a safety concern. But anything smaller than that, smaller mammals, birds, and pretty much every type of insect is something we seek to support. So the monarch, you're completely right. The monarch gets a lot of attention, so do the bees, but our program is really meant to support everything as long as it's safe. So, I'll think of an example. One time I was out walking the right of way and came across an area where we had some really small mesquite trees, and there were just thousands and thousands and thousands of stick bugs all over the right of way. And I'd never even seen a stick bug in nature before. And I get outside a lot. I go hiking, so that was an interesting thing. So there's one example for you, but we really like to support everything. We do a lot with, the Migratory Birds Act, and also supporting some of our endangered species with special habitat management areas. So we really do try to look at the whole ecosystem.
Okay, we have a question. A couple questions. How do you avoid attracting some of the animals like deer or larger animals that you don't want to attract?
Yeah, so that is a hard question. We certainly know there are some species that deer love to eat, especially when the forage is kind of sparse. So we do try to avoid, as much as we can, planting some things like that, like wild oats and things that they might, have really good forage off of. They are things that we've planted historically for ground cover reasons and to prevent erosion, but kind of some things that we're working away from. But there really isn't a great way to prevent it, especially with the way that Texas highways are lined out. If you get into some of the more really heavily urban areas like up north where I'm from, you have, concrete retaining walls and all kinds of stuff lining your highways where there's more of a physical barrier. Down here, we probably have a post fence with some barbed wire that might be a couple feet tall. It's not going to stop any deer from getting onto the right of ways, and they are going to cross the road. It was their habitat first. So it's one of those things that is hard to balance, but we do try to avoid planting anything that will serve as good forage for them. And generally, wildflowers are not, so they provide a you know, pretty good double benefit there as well.
Deer crossing the road reminds me of my other poster. See if I can lean the right way behind me, which is wildlife crossing save lives. Whoops, let me lean that way. Another common sense, pragmatic thing we can do. And I meant to say this earlier, and I'll say it, and then I'll get to the other question. One of the reasons why we encourage lawmakers to think hard about this is it's just so common sense, pragmatic. It even feels nicely apolitical. Like, how do we help bees and butterflies? Well, let's give them some habitat along our roadsides. We have 10 million acres of it plus in the country. So that's one of the reasons I think you guys love it, why we love it. It just is a good, especially in kind of a difficult political times, it feels like it's just a good thing that can bring us all together and can be very bipartisan. I'll add that some of the laws that have passed via legislation, they have been very bipartisan and often, well, different states have different members of both parties have led in different states. So that's great. Okay, let me stop talking though and get to these questions. How do these programs adapt to meet the needs of pollinators throughout the year? I think that's the key part of that question. For example, do monarchs go to different flowers at different points of their migratory season?
So I think, the main thing for us is probably when talking about the monarch specifically is the avoidance. So for us, it'd be timing on our mowing. The herbicide applications, maybe not so much because the things that we target with those herbicide applications are not really things that are going to be of much use to the monarch. It's really more the mowing. We want to make sure we allow that milkweed to continue to grow and bloom, primarily in that spring migration. That's when they're really heavy on the milkweed, especially here in Texas. So waiting till that June 1st date that we traditionally have is usually pretty good to get almost all those monarchs out of the state and onto more northern places. When it comes to the fall, it's a little bit more tricky. Even just talking about this year, we had a really late monarch migration. I kind of saw the peak of our migration here in Texas, at least what I noticed, kind of mid-November, where it'd usually be more like mid-October. So, in that sense, we do kind of ask our maintenance sections, which are sort of those individual county level entities, to avoid mowing if they see, a peak monarch migration in that area. Does it always happen 100% of the time? Not always, but we do our best to make sure that we're, avoiding those resources while they're there. I'd say in the fall, it's a little bit more heavily leaning into having our, nectar resources, things like our fall bloomers, various gay feathers and golden rods and other species like that, more so than the milkweed. But yeah, hopefully that answers the question a bit.
Great. This one might be more for Travis, but you guys decide. And I'm going to combine this question with one I had of one of my own. Travis, why, or both of either of you, why the emphasis on native seeds? You said it repeatedly. I know my answer. I want you to answer too. And then combined with, does your seed distribution network work well? And do you have additional tips for how to develop that seed supply?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I'll start from the back question and move forward. I think the seed supply is one of the things that we run up against. Obviously, we have got Texas native seed getting the seed together, and they distribute it out to the seed companies, and then they grow it out even larger, things of that sort. What one of Texas anyway, one of our issues is there's so many people that follow our seed spec. So we're talking in the urban areas, native park type areas, things of that sort. So there's a lot of people that follow our spec. So the seed companies can only make so much seed. It's a commodity. So once it's gone, we got to wait an entire another year for it to come back around. Why native seeds? Native seeds have in general, different natives have different root structures. It's better than it's not introduced, but they're introduced grasses, things of like Bermuda, or maybe you might have St. Augustine in your yard, or zoysia or something like that. They have a very shallow root system that take a lot of water. Natives like to put down deep roots. They go dormant very easily during drought, where then they get a little bit of rain and they pop right back out because they've got deep roots. They just kind of went dormant, right? So that is our emphasis on natives. Natives long term work better than introduced type species. We're always going to have something introduced in our right of way, one of which, like Sam was talking about, our Johnson grass. That is our number one invasive species in our state. Talking to other states, they have just as much a problem with it. And so those things that we consider that are invasive, like to take over the good stuff, or things that we need to keep in our situation, which would be native species.
Great, thank you. And I'll add that natives also co-evolved over the millennia with all the other species out there. So you want to help bees and butterflies, you want to help birds, you want to help the native species, the wildlife, I should say. Native plants do that really nicely. All right, we have one more question, which is maybe for any of us, but what can other states outside of Texas do to bring awareness and visibility to the need for programs to protect pollinators? I'll say that some states have a license plate that both brings awareness and raises money. I'll also say that any programs like this, whether it's roadsides or native flowering plants along state government buildings, especially with sometimes coupled with a sign that kind of explains what's happening and why, can bring awareness to the plight of pollinators. But I also want to turn it over to you, Sam, and or Travis, to answer this as well.
I think Steve. I think you're right on track as far as we talked about our safety rest areas and public notification, and a lot of it's just education. And if we can get the education out, we talked a lot about today about how mowing and using some herbicide on spot treatment, that gets a lot of negative information. is put out there about that. But if we just educate the public and educate each other of what we have out there and why we're doing what we're doing, a lot of times that speaks volumes. That goes so much further than just putting it on a piece of paper and sliding it across the table. Let's sit down. Let's have those roundtable discussions. Let's sit down and we'll talk about it. The state of Texas has taken great stride, huge strides to bring awareness of our wildflower program. Our entire everything that we do in our right of way is based around our wildflower program. Sam talked about it earlier. Do not mow until set seed, right? That spoke volumes since the 30s. We keep that going, and we got to keep it alive. We've got to keep talking about it. We got to keep it on the table, keep it in front of us. I think that's the way to keep it going and to get other states involved.
I'll add in something there too, Steve. I think the public buy-in sometimes is actually easier than getting sort of the more legislative or organizational policy buy-in. And I think a big way that we can really handle that is by looking at the cost. Like we kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, if you don't have programs where you're supporting the pollinators and native plants, by switching to a program that does, are you maybe going to have a nominally higher initial entry cost? Absolutely. But once you get that program developed, your costs are going to decrease drastically, probably by 50% or more on your vegetation management. And that's just a guess. But generally, we do find that integrated vegetation management programs are better for the environment, but they also help reduce our costs. So that's a good way to sort of work that in to get sort of organizational buy-in for developing these programs.
Right. And you're reminding me that reduced mowing also is good for some of the birds nesting along the roadsides and some of the other species there too. So it's not just it's cost, but it's more. All right, we have two more questions, and then we'll end with these two, and we'll take them in this order. One of our attendees asks, has your herbicide use reduced as a result of this? Or are the invasives just too difficult to manage and it hasn't reduced? That's question one. And then we'll end with this one. And this might start a fight between you, Sam, and Travis. So I hope not. But what's the prettiest stretch of roadside in Texas based on the thing we're talking about, roadside habitat? So we'll take them in that order. The first question is herbicide use.
Yeah, so I think with the herbicide use, it can be kind of hard to track. I would say generally it probably has decreased because our vegetation management, especially in recent years, has gotten more and more involved, but we're not using more herbicide. So in any given area, we're probably doing more cycles of vegetation management than we would have in the past, while using probably roughly the same amount of herbicide. So we do see some decrease, but the invasives are very hard to control. Can I say definitively that we've seen a exponential or massive decrease in our Johnson grass problem? Not really. I mean, we're fighting it. We're fighting the good fight here, but we cannot get rid of that Johnson grass. So there are invasives that are really hard to manage. A lot of that, comes down to staffing issues, not having enough staffing to really dedicate, a full-time herbicide operator, for example, to every one of our maintenance sections and things like that. But I would say broadly, yes, it has decreased. But some of those major players in sort of the invasive species game, like Johnson grass, turnip weed or bastard cabbage, what else, Travis? Musk thistles, some of the major invasives, tumbleweeds, yeah, kochias and Russian thistles, very hard for us to control.
Okay. And then unless Travis wanted to say more, onto the question that might start a fight, so we can put you on other sides of the opposite sides of the room. What's the prettiest stretch of Texas roadside based on this program?
In Texas is the question.
Yeah.
I'm going with the Llano Hill Country area with the granite outcroppings that come up very close to the soil surface. They bring a very vibrant, bright colors in the wildflowers. So there's some very deep colors and very, very distinct colors that you don't see. You don't see them. You don't see them grow out there every year, but when they do, they are very, very deep in color. And that granite outcropping, that's usually a reddish granite that comes all the way out. If you're familiar with outcroppings, but personally, that's my favorite place.
And again, you said Llano. Am I saying it right?
Llano. It's
Llano.
Llano. Yeah, Llano. Llano.
Okay.
That's a good one, and I tend to agree with Travis. That's probably one of the best general regions of the state. I think One road that stands out to me that I always love driving on is US 183 north of Lampasas, very, very close to where Travis is talking about. They have, these amazing stands of standing cypress each year, which is a wildflower I really like. One that's hard to get to grow from seed, so they're probably there naturally, but they come up really nicely. So Google that one if you have some time.
Great. Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you to our two panelists. Thank you to Vivian for managing us and making sure nothing went wrong. Uh, Appreciate all the people who joined the webinar. We'll have this recorded. We'll look for other places to post it, including on YouTube. We'll send that recording to everyone who signed up so you can review it if you want. Thanks again, and that's it for today.
Thanks so much, Steve.
Yep. Bye, everyone.